Hi everyone, Jason here from Spiritualbabies.net, and you've joined us again for another Haftarat Torah with our friend Rabbi Joshua Neely.
Always good to be here.
And this week we're looking at, well, you know what? You probably won't have cause if you're keeping the traditional calendar of Haftarah readings. You probably won't have cause to ever look at this in a natural lifetime. Let's change by the calendar. But you may want to if you're going week by week on what the Haftarah is traditionally for that Torah portion. You may want to look. So we're doing it. So this is the Haftarah for Miketz, and it's 1 Kings 3:15 through to 3:28. It's quite a famous story. It's one you might have heard when you were at school. First of all, like every other week, Rabbi, can you tell us why this is the Haftarah portion in a nutshell for the Torah portion of Miketz?
Well, it's the Haftarah mainly because of the first line, which is to say that it begins with with Solomon awaking from a dream, and as in Miketz, we have the fulfillment of Pharaoh's dream and all of the other issues that go on. It seems fitting that the Haftarah would mention dreams as well. Also, as Joseph, for whom the parashah spends a great deal of time, was known for his wisdom and his ability to figure things out, not just dreams, but also the rule of a country, as he was second in command to Pharaoh. Demonstrating Solomon's wisdom is also an important connection.
So we start off, don't we, in verse 15 with kind of I'm showing my age a little bit, but a Bobby Ewing moment. When then Solomon awoke, and it was a dream. And for anyone that was around watching Dallas in the 80s, you'll probably get the reference. So go back and read what happened up to that point, and why it was a dream, and what happened in that dream. So I'm going to start from 15. Then Solomon awoke, and it was a dream. He went to Jerusalem, stood before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, and sacrificed burnt offerings, and presented offerings of well-being, and made a banquet for all his courtiers. For anyone that hasn't looked at the Tanakh, really, I get there's kind of a tradition that there's really only one type of offering in the Tanakh, right? Most people just think it's an animal, and it's for one reason. It's a sin offering, but the Tanakh's full of different offerings, isn't it?
It is, in fact, enough to take up an entire book. Most of the book of Leviticus, well, at least the first part of it, details many different types of offerings and the reasons. It's a very complicated spiritual path and gets a lot of bad publicity, unfortunately. But I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about that in more detail another time.
So from 16. Later, 2 prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. The first woman said, "Please, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth to a child while she was in the house. On the 3rd day after I was delivered, the woman also gave birth to a child. We were alone. There was no one with us in the house, just the 2 of us in the house. During the night, this woman's child died because she lay on it. She rose in the night and took my son from my side while your maidservant was sleeping, and laid him on her bosom. Then I arose in the morning to nurse my son, and there he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning, it was not my son that I had born." So first of all, it's a tragic story. Both of these women have lost a child. And so it says, I'm just going to kind of try and nutshell it. So she's had the baby for 3 days, and then gives birth to a child who she falls asleep on, probably rolls onto, suffocates her. She literally goes in, takes the other woman's baby, and starts nursing it and calling it her own.
That is the claim. As we're going to see, that's not quite how it plays out. I guess I should have said spoiler alert. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the basic tragedy that starts the entire story going is the fact that one of the children has died. Maybe we should point out that in the ancient world, and really up until the modern world, babies slept in the bed with their parents all the time. That was the normal place. The idea of having a bassinet or a crib or cot, as you might say in England or Ireland, didn't exist. the kids slept with you in the bed, and they slept pretty much long enough until they were old enough to know what was going on, and then you needed another place for them to sleep.
So this may have been a more common event than is maybe recognized. I imagine.
One of the Midrashim, one of the rabbinic teachings, brings that up and says, no, actually, this is a fairly rare occurrence. That as this was the norm for infants to sleep with their parents, if people were rolling over and crushing their babies all the time, then there would have been A, a lot of record of it, and B, not a lot of people, because people wouldn't survive infancy. That there is a sort of natural instinct among families not to do precisely this. And when you've shared a bed with someone for a while, as husband and wife, or if you've ever had the kids, come in from a nightmare or something, you don't end up crushing them accidentally. But you do learn how to share the covers. You learn how to keep a position in bed so as to accommodate other people. So I think the idea that rolling over and crushing the child, while reasonable, must have still been fairly rare.
Fair point. I'm thinking as well, when I was a kid, we'd be told this story sometimes. It's one of the kind of more famous Bible stories because it's nice and short. I think people liked it because of that reason. But the lady that steals the child always comes off as kind of a bad person. But we read in the newspapers often about women who have lost their children, and psychologically it's such a traumatic thing that they do reach out and take other children to replace, to fill that void. So I have to feel a little bit sorry for
her. Definitely, there needs to be sympathy for the mother who lost her child. I mean, in addition to the child himself, but we may not want to give too much sympathy. I mean, once we have the story play out, I'm going to go back in and explain how the rabbinic tradition has read this story. There's another layer of meaning that's going on here that may make the woman who is at fault a little bit less sympathetic.
The other woman spoke up. No, the live one is my son, the dead one is yours. But the first insisted. No, the live boy is yours. No, the live boy... get this right. I'm turning around it. No, the dead boy is yours. Mine is the live one. And they went on arguing before the king.
Before we go on, I don't know whether you're planning in the final version to edit that slip, but it's a very significant one. The fact that you had trouble reading the second half of that sentence is precisely because the ordering is backwards to normal instinct. Right? The first woman speaks and says, "The live one is mine, and the dead one is yours." And the first one, the one who brought the claim, doesn't start off by saying, "No, the live one is mine." She starts off by focusing on the dead. And says, "No, the dead's yours, and mine is the live one," almost as a secondary consideration. And that's beginning to tip the hand that the first woman who has spoken is really the one who is the guilty party. And partly that we see that now by the way she's referring to the dead one in an almost unnatural way first, before making the statement about what she claims is her living son.
Great, that's definitely staying in. The king said, "One says, 'This is my son, the live one, and the dead one is yours.' The other says, 'No, the dead boy is yours, mine is the live one.' So the king gave the order, 'Fetch me a sword.' A sword was brought before the king, and the king said, 'Cut the live child in two, and give half to one and half to the other.'"
Since Solomon is going to become famous for his wisdom, we should, through this story, let's see if we can unravel a few of the things that were standing out here, even before we get to other layers of meaning. So, first of all, he restates the claims of each woman exactly as each one said it. So note, we have the quote, "This one is the son is the live one, yours is the dead," and then the other one, in that inverted form, he quotes directly. He doesn't paraphrase the second, or technically the first woman who spoke, but second in the previous line. He doesn't paraphrase, he quotes it exactly. And therefore he's showing that he picked up on that nuanced phrasing, that there was something unusual in the other woman's way of referring to the dead. Secondly, he asks for a sword to be brought to him. He doesn't just say, cut the baby in half, for fear that the guards would actually do it. The guards were sworn to obey the king, so instead the sword is coming to him so that he can continue with the play acting without risking the actual child's life. So it's, and then of course the final kicker is that in verse 25, he is adjudicating this exactly as Jewish law says you should when dealing with property. That is to say, if two people show up with an item and they each have a hold of it, and they each are claiming, this is mine, and the other one says, no, this is mine, and there's no other evidence available, Jewish law says you cut it in half. If two people are fighting over a cloak, you simply cut the cloak in half, and you say, okay, we can't decide, so I guess you get half and you get half. So he is using a legal remedy that the people would have known as appropriate for a whole wide variety of situations. Completely inappropriate for human beings, of course, but he is using legal-sounding language here. He's not just making this up, if you'll pardon the expression, whole cloth.
And I guess while he's doing that, it's giving the other two a chance to, the two women a chance to figure out what is going to occur in the next few seconds, rather than just catching them off guard, giving them a chance to think about their actions. But the woman whose son was the live one pleaded with the king, for she was overcome with compassion for her son. Please, my lord, she cried, give her the live child, only don't kill it. The other insisted, it shall be neither yours nor mine, cut it in two. Then the king spoke up, give the live child to her, he said. Do not put it to death, she is its mother. When all Israel heard the decision that the king had rendered, they stood in awe of the king, for they saw that he possessed divine wisdom to execute justice. Happy ending for for one of the ladies. So she was quite prepared to let that baby get sliced up.
Well, that's where the Jewish Midrash, the Jewish teaching of our sages, is going to or take off. It's going to pick up on that and take off in its direction. Because he said already, that it's, sorry, the other woman has already said, I don't, don't kill it. Don't kill the baby. Just give it to the other woman. So the other woman, who was the first one who spoke up in the case, should have just kept her mouth shut and said thank you. Right? If she had spoken first and saying, go ahead and cut it in two, and then the other woman said, no, give it to her, that would have been a much more natural sequence of events for us to connect to. But she seems to be even happier for the baby to die than for her to have it. I mean, than for the one who's claiming in the beginning that it's actually her. And that is totally shocking and completely opposite of what we would expect, not just of a mother to do, but what we would expect even a litigant to do. I mean, if she had lost her kid and now she was being handed this other one because the real mother had given up claim out of sympathy, she should have taken the baby and walked away. Why in the world would she say, no, actually death is even better than I was expecting when I came to court today. Better the baby should die than anything. That's where the Midrash picks up. So the Midrash says this is a very particular case happening here. These are not just two random women. These are a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. The two women are a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law, and both of them have lost their husbands. All right, we're following so far? So
yeah.
That means you have the mother-in-law and husband, and you have the son of the mother-in-law, which is woman number 2 in order of how they speak up, and you have the daughter-in-law who was married to the son of the other woman. And both of their husbands have died. Now, according to Jewish law, if a husband dies, leaving no children, then Yibum, the law of Levirate marriage, kicks in as being inactive. And it means that the woman is then bound to the brother of the husband that has passed away. And that brother will be responsible for marrying her and for providing a child in continuing the lineage of the deceased man. Right? We got all that so far?
Right. We talked about that a couple of weeks, didn't we? That's kind of where the story of Tamar comes in.
It's exactly the same theme as Judah and Tamar. But you get into a certain complication. So let me just point out a couple caveats to this rule. So if you have a living grandchild, even if you have no living children, then the law of Yibum does not apply. So if the man dies and his son is also dead, but he has a living grandchild, then his widow does not need to remarry the brother-in-law and have new children, because the grandchild is considered to continue the lineage. On the other hand, if you are in a position where the only living brother is a child, is below the age of marrying, you are still required to be technically engaged to him until he reaches the age of maturity and can either marry you or release you through the process known as chalitza, where the boy says, or the man says, I will not continue my brother's line. Again, see the story of Judah and Tamar for more details on that, as well as the rest of the Torah. So, here's how the rabbis interpret this entire episode. You have the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. The mother-in-law gives birth to a son, and the daughter-in-law also gives birth to a son, but both of their husbands are dead. The daughter-in-law's son dies, right? That means she is now obligated to marry the infant son of her mother-in-law. She's not really happy with that, because that means she's got to wait years before he's even old enough to release her, and let alone actually if she wants to stay in this family and have a relationship with him. Whereas the older mother would not be in such a problem if it had been reversed, right? If the older mother had a living grandchild, then she would not be stuck in the status of Yibum and waiting for anybody. So the only one who really has a reason to lie about whose the child is the daughter-in-law. She's the one with the motive, as they say in all the crime dramas. And even better for her is if the child was dead, then she would be off the hook, because now the infant brother-in-law that she was supposed to marry because her own husband was dead, now he's dead, and there's no more husband, so there's no chance for any new brothers, so she is perfectly in the clear well in advance. So the death of the second child, the death of the mother-in-law's child, is an even better outcome for her than claiming that this child is actually hers when it isn't. And that's the web of deceit that Solomon saw through, according to rabbinic teaching. Really has a motive in all of this. Who really has a vested interest in not only taking another woman's child and being willing to argue about this in court, but also having a legal motive for why she would still be willing to have the child be killed, even when the legitimate mother was willing to give up the child out of compassion. And the answer is, well, it would be a daughter-in-law who wasn't interested in either raising the child from her deceased husband on her own, or in waiting around for that kid to grow up that she could marry him. And that would be the only unique circumstances where you would have somebody making the claims that they're making in this court.
I started off with a joke about a soap opera, but it ends up as a soap opera.
Well, you know, most family law court cases do. Soap operas may exaggerate the behaviors for entertainment purposes, but our tradition, not just within the Tanakh, not just within the Bible, but throughout all of rabbinic literature, where we have just centuries and centuries of recorded questions and answers regarding various family issues, show that families get really, really complicated, and the interactions and behaviors are not always what we would call good, which is why it's, I think, very, very important that what Solomon is demonstrating here is not just wisdom of understanding a criminal, or not just wisdom of understanding how to render the law, but wisdom of understanding a family. Because that's the ultimate testimony to wisdom. Is, you know, anybody can figure out, you know, Stephen Hawking's the nature of time, reality, space, and everything else. And if you want to figure out viruses and DNA, okay, fine, yeah, you're a clever person. But if you can figure out a family, that's wisdom.
Very good. Well, there we are, boys and girls. That's the end of today's show. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for giving us your time, Rabbi Neely.
Oh, it's always fun.
And we'll see you again very soon. Stick around to the end of the video and you'll see the Haftarah portion for next week. And we'll see you all again very soon. Bye-bye.